Good morning and welcome to the Hillsborough County MPO. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our gracious and Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that you touch us with your loving hands to allow us to see another one of your beautiful days. We're so thankful that you allow us to come together today to work to make this county a better place for all of us to live, work, and play. We ask that you regulate our minds and humble our hearts as we make these decisions. Father, we ask that you put your loving arms around those that protect us each and every day, whether they're on this soil or foreign soils. And when their work is done, we ask you to bring them back to their homes and find everything safe and sound. And Father, we ask that at the end of our day, that you bring us back to our home safe and sound. These are all blessings we ask in your righteous and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Let me welcome everyone this morning. Before we get started, we have the minutes from the November 5th, 2019 meeting. Hope you had an opportunity to look at those. If so, we have a motion to approve those minutes. A motion by Councilman Maniscalco. Second by Commissioner Overman to approve the minutes from November 5th. Any discussion? See no discussion. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Likewise, motion is adopted. Before we get started, we have a new member to our MPO board, Mr. Marino. Welcome aboard. You want to say a few words about yourself and why you're here or why you don't want to be here, whatever the case may be.
Thank you. My name is Michael Marino.
Put a mic down in front of you.
My name is Michael Marino. I'm the Plan Commission's appointee to the MPO, and I'm a City of Tampa appointee to the Plan Commission. My day job is I'm the Director of Transportation Planning for the West Shore Alliance. I'm also on the Port Tampa Civic Association Neighborhood Board.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Lott, you're right there. Okay, we have a special presentation, Florida Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged. Mr. Ogilvie.
Don't move.
Nice looking, Jack.
Good morning, Board. Michelle Ogilvie, MPO staff. Each year, the Florida Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged recognizes individuals and organizations within the community that have exhibited exceptional service, personal excellence, and dedication towards serving persons who are transportation disadvantaged. This year, the Hillsborough MPO was recognized as the planning agency called the DOPA, the Designated Official Planning Agency, that went beyond the scope of their work to implement coordinated transportation. And highlighted in this award is the MPO's practice of connecting and including the current agendas of both the MPO and its committees with the TD board. This is unique to the state. The Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged staff could not attend our celebration today, but sends the following message. Thank you for reaching out to us. We would have loved to have been able to participate in the celebration. We truly appreciate all that the MPO has done to continue to do and continues to do to support the TD program. We hope that you have a great holiday. And it's signed by Sherry Power of the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged. At that event, we also were recognized for Miss Gloria Mills, who is the Vice Chair of the TD Board, for her 23 years of service to this organization. And also, Hillsborough came away with the Driver of the Year designation for the state. And Scott Clark from Sunshine Line is also here to celebrate with us. So congratulations to us all for being recognized as the Planning Agency of the Year for the state of Florida Transportation Disadvantaged.
Thank you.
And Beth, what do I do now?
I'd like to invite our guests to come up and take a photograph of us with the board, if that's all right with you. If we could all just kind of gather around here. And Michelle, Scott, and Gloria.
Gonna take a picture.
Yep, we need to, scoot over. Hey, come in the middle. Michelle, come on over.
I'm sure you can stand in front of
Come
me.
hang out.
I'll leave you blocking her email.
All right, take a couple. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. One more.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Gloria and Scott.
Change the
Change what?
We're now moving to public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board this morning? Public comment? Seeing no one, okay, thank you very much. We're now moving to committee reports online. Committee reports and online.
Roberts couldn't be here, so I'm going to do the all the reports for the committees and your online comments. The CAC met at the Expressway Authority and visited the Traffic Management Center. Many thanks to Thea for rolling out the red carpet, and to the City of Tampa Traffic Engineer Brandon Campbell for a great overview. Committee members were thoroughly engaged. Following the tour, the CAC reviewed and recommended approval of the amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program and Unified Planning Work Program on today's action item. It's one of the action items. It reflects Federal Transit Administration's grant funding as well as an allocation from the Board of County Commissioners for safety feasibility studies on 8 high crash corridors in the county. That item is also approved by your other committees, the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Technical Advisory Committees. All committees approved the 2020 calendar, and that's on today's consent agenda. HART briefed the CAC and your other committees on their Flamingo Fare app, which enables transit passengers to seamlessly travel across Tampa Bay area using refillable cards or phone apps, and the One Best Away app, which allows passengers to plan their trips and track their bus arrivals in real time. The Citizen and Technical Advisory Committees meet jointly for their next meeting at 1:30 on December 16th in this room. The Transportation Management Area Leadership Group held a lengthy discussion at their last meeting on the regional priorities. There's a full summary in your packet, but there was a motion that passed unanimously to support HART as it begins to negotiate with CSX for joint use or purchase of rail lines from downtown to USF for passenger service, and support for the 41-mile T-BARTA Regional Rapid Transit Project being added as a priority. So those were your committee reports. And then for online comments, we only had no Facebook posts, but we had 4 emails. Rock King congratulated Beth and staff for hard work leading up to the adoption of the 2045 LRTP. Secretary Gwynn and I responded to a woman who lost a family member to a traffic crash, and he was clarifying reasons behind the biweekly traffic fatality reports. On behalf of FHWA, Richard Redding with Sam Schwartz thanked our team for hosting the Safety Performance Target Workshop Peer Exchange. And then Lena Young Green thanked us for being powerful partners with the Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association and bringing folks from the FHWA Peer Exchange on MPO and Vision Zero, which is the second one we had in a couple weeks, to view the intersection mural and to take a tour of the community garden. So we were busy in November. So that's the end of the report.
Any questions? Any questions? Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we'll now move to the consent agenda. You have committee appointments in the 2020 MPO Board of Committee meeting calendar. Any questions on that? If not, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
I was looking at the calendar for 2020, and there is a MPO meeting on November 4th, which apparently is the same date as our VOCC meeting.
They'll change it.
We will change that then.
They'll change it.
And there may be a challenge with the June public hearing. It may be at the same time as the other meetings. So, those are the 2 dates that I kind of remember when we were going through the calendar.
We have to make sure land use is meeting that day. Change some dates at that time.
I just want to bring it to attention that later in the year, mid-year, there looks as though there's a couple of conflicts.
Yep, we were working from a draft from the VOCC calendar, so maybe we don't have the final dates.
Very
Thanks.
possible.
Any other questions? Motion was made by Scalco. Motion was made by Commissioner Kemp, second by Councilman Scalco. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. We're now moving to action items for 2020 MPO officers and election of officers and committee representatives. Clark.
Good morning, board members. Cameron Clark. I have a couple of officer positions, and then we'll do committee appointments for the coming year. I'll ask for nominations. Nominations don't require a second, and then I'll also vote on nominations. So first, I'd ask for a nomination for MPO chair.
I nominate Commissioner Kemp.
Commissioner Kemp is nominated. Are there any other nominations?
Commissioner Miller?
Commissioner Miller is nominated. Are there any other nominations? Okay. In order of nomination, may I see a show of hands for Commissioner Kemp? I see 5 votes of present 13 members. May I see a show of hands for Commissioner Miller? Okay, Commissioner Miller is elected chair. Next, may I have a nomination for vice chair?
Commissioner Kemp.
Commissioner Kemp is nominated. Are there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, Commissioner Kemp is vice chair. Next, you have MPO Policy Committee. This is a 5-member committee with 2 alternates. The present membership, there's no changes in board membership, so presently it's Commissioners Kemp and Smith, Councilman Maniscalco, School Board Member Stewart, Thea Director Wagoner. The alternates are Port Director Anderson and Commissioner Overman. You can continue the current membership, or if there are any changes.
I see no changes.
Okay, so current membership is maintained. TMA Leadership Group, presently Commissioners Overman and Kemp and Councilman Vieira. Alternates are Port Director Anderson and Aviation Authority Director Lapano. Any changes there? Okay, maintain current membership. Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board Chair is Councilman Vieira. Per Ms. Alden, Councilman Vieira is not present this morning, but he expressed interest in continuing in that function. Okay. Livable Roadways Committee Chair, that was Planning Commissioner Green, so that will require a reappointment.
Can I nominate myself?
Well, I mean, I don't think, we don't need to do nominations. The chair can actually appoint committee memberships.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you.
Okay, and finally, the MPO Advisory Council member is, per the bylaws, the MPO chair. However, there's an alternate, which is presently Director Anderson. Any changes there? Okay, that's all it's needed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks for your vote of confidence. I appreciate it very, very much. We now move to the UPWP and TIP Amendment.
Good morning, everyone.
Put the mic in front of it.
Good morning, everyone. This is Vishaka Shivaraman. I'm MPO staff. And today I'm going to be presenting, Today I'm going to be presenting to you the FY 2019-20 Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP, and Transportation Improvement Program, TIP Amendment. As you might know, the UPWP is our 2-year work program. It outlines the major planning tasks, and it documents the federal and state funding. It coordinates the federally funded transportation planning tasks with the MPO, the HART, and the FDOT. So every year, it's a 2-year work program, like I said, and it's effective from July 1st, 2018 to June 30th of the following year. And every year we might have amendments which come throughout the year between the first and the second year. And this is the second year. So today's amendment is for the adjustment of the FY20 FTA budget and FTA contract documentation. With this amendment, it also updates the task 2, which is a system and corridor planning, and under that is a section for the congestion management, crash mitigation, and ITS section. This is to reflect the $500,000 allocation towards the Vision Zero corridor safety projects, which was allocated. I just wanted to point out the FTA 5305 budget allocation. In this, it updates the amount to 617,000, and that's an increase of 11,845. This money is added to Task 3 of the Transportation Planning and Data, and it also updates to the contracts and documentation. This is it's a regular administrative update process. I just wanted to point out to you the identified high crash corridors. These are, if I could just read through the corridors, they are the 15th Street, 78th Street, Bruce B. Downs Boulevard, CR 579, Fletcher Avenue, Lynn Turner Road, Sheldon Road, and Gibsonton Avenue from these portions which are shown here. These are the identified corridors which came out as the top 8, which were identified out of the top 20 from the Vision Zero action plan. And these roads are all in the unincorporated county area. So these are the crash corridors which were recognized as one of the most dangerous and high priority corridors for Vision Zero. With this part the previous part was for the UPWP amendment. Now moving on to the TIP amendment. It's the same project. It is for as you might know, the TIP is our annual work program, which runs through October 1st of 2019 to the following year, September 30th. The TIP identifies, prioritizes, and allocates all the projects by the state, local, and federal funding, and it also shows the projects which are being funded over the 5 years by phase and by year. This is just a sample page of how this TIP amendment will be reflected in the TIP. If you can see, the first part is the adopted TIP, which was adopted in June by the board, and the second part is the amended, which will show that the amendment number, and it shows where the funds have been added. There is an increase from around 9 million to 10 million. With this, I would recommend that the board please approve the following amendments: the UPWP amendment, the updation of the FY20 budget adjustments and contract documentation, the updating of the task to the UPWP, and also please approve the TIP FY1920 Amendment 10 to the TIP.
Okay, can we take those all at the same time and have them separate?
One requires a roll call vote, but you can do it all as one part of one vote.
Which one requires a roll call vote?
TIP amendments require a roll call vote. Now, if you want to do the UPWP as part of the same motion and wrap it up also in the same roll call, you could do that, or if you could separate.
Okay, all right. Any questions? Any questions? Is there a motion to adopt the recommended action by staff?
So moved.
Motion by Mr.
Second.
Mechanic, second by Mr. Marino. Would you like to wrap them all up together? That'd be okay. All right. We're going to have a roll call vote on both of those, which is the fiscal year 1920 UPWP and the fiscal year 1920 TIP. Roll call vote.
Klug, yes.
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 Dorado,
Yes.
Citro, Moreno,
Yes.
Hagan,
Yes.
Sherberger. Yes. Lott,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Overman,
Yes.
Rocco,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we move to the processing for updating TIP priorities and letter to the local agencies. Ms. McKinney. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's see. Okay, thank you. All right, good morning, Sarah McKinley, MPO staff. This morning, I'm going to go over a letter that we've drafted to be sent to each of the local jurisdictions, as well as other partner agencies that we work through for our transportation improvement priority process. This presentation is just sort of a quick overview of what we do through that priority process and the development of the TIP, just sort of as a refresher. So when we're developing the TIP, there's always 3, sometimes 4 transportation improvement programs that are in existence. Every June, we adopt a new program. Through that, we still have the existing TIP that is there between July and September. That new TIP that was adopted in June doesn't become effective until October 1. Through that, we also do roll forward amendments to sort of catch up what any changes between that June adoption and that October effective date. After that October effective date, starting early in the new year, we begin drafting the next TIP for adoption the following June. We also update our priorities at the same time. So while we're adopting and drafting a new TIP to be adopted that June, we're also working on the priority list to incorporate projects for future funding in future years as well. So this is sort of the timeline that we work on every year, drafting that TIP. As you see, we're sort of continually working with DOT and the jurisdictions, developing those priorities in the beginning of the year. We then, in April, get the snapshot that is what is used to develop the actual TIP document. That goes through our committees in May. We have our June adoption date. And then again, July, we work on roll forward amendments, updating our interactive TIP tool for the effective date in October. And then after October, we get sort of the highlights for the next year, which is what was presented last month at the policy committee. And those are sort of what's going to be in that snapshot we'll get in April, again, moving forward. So really what we want to talk about today is the priority process and how we develop that priority list. Like I said, we go out to each of our jurisdictions and partner agencies early in the year and sort of review their previous priorities as well as any new priorities they have. In March, they submit a list to us, and that's what we incorporate, or how we incorporate those projects into the priority list. This year, we're suggesting that we do a workshop, possibly January, February timeframe, to bring all the jurisdictions in to maybe our policy committee. That way they can interact with the members of that committee or any other board members that like to sit in on it to go through those priorities. We did this a couple years ago, and it was very favorable to the members and the jurisdictions to be able to sort of sit and discuss what priorities we're moving forward as well. So as far as getting priorities onto the priority list, currently we, again, work very closely with our jurisdiction and partner agencies to determine what priorities they want on the list. Right now we're working at a staff level to create that list, and through the letter we're proposing that we'd like to see the legislative bodies have more input into the list. We then work closely with DOT staff, particularly their work program, to then determine what funds are available for each of the priorities that are moved forward. As we prioritize projects, they're again funded through phases, so it's everything in our TIP is by year and by phase. That's sort of the key to that document, making sure that we're showing each of the phases. So project development and environmental design, right-of-way, construction, each of those are there, and again, typically phased, funded year by year. And then there also is the possibility working with work program that, say, most of the time we're planning on 5th year out. So everything is 5 years out when we're working with that priority list. So through that, we've also worked closely with the jurisdictions, particularly Hillsborough County, the Big Bend project as an example, where we were able to have Hillsborough County move that project up into fiscal year 2021, and then they will be reimbursed by the state in fiscal year 24, just to be able to move that project forward. So there are sort of those areas where we can work with them as well. This is just going through some of the funding sources that we work with. If you remember from our long-range transportation plan update that was just adopted last month, some of these figures and funding sources were discussed greatly through that process. So looking at the strategic intermodal system, that is sort of the large piece of what is funded for state projects. This is also including the State Road 60 interchange, which was now worked into the highlights for that. We also have our other arterial funds that we work with the state to prioritize. US 92 has been a big priority that we've been working on, as well as US 301, US 41, Fowler, State Road 674. Those are some of the projects there, and looked at about $36 million allocated through these funding sources for fiscal year 20. There's also the Transportation Regional Incentives Program. This is also known as the TRIP program. This is a sort of allocated by the district throughout the district, and is a local funding, or requires a local funding match for this, but also can be used for projects of regional significance. There was a project in Hillsborough County, the Dale Mabry intersection update for the north part of the county that was funded through this funding source. And then additional Metropolitan grants, looking at other projects. This is a lot of our surface transportation program projects, and this equated to about $20 million in fiscal year 20. Additional funding sources include our transit programs. These include the block grants that HART receives, as well as other priority projects. We have also, we prioritize bus replacements every year and other technology upgrades that HART has requested. And this is about $26 million allocated to transit programs in fiscal year 20. There's also the Florida New Starts program. This equated for about $42 million statewide. There are some, also, some of the projects that have been funded through this category are the Central Avenue BRT, as well as the Sun Rail. There is the Sun Trail program as well. This equates to about $25 million statewide in fiscal 20. Hillsborough County did, through the highlights that we received this year, get their first Sun Trail funding for the Big Bend side path near the Big Bend I-75 interchange. So that's sort of exciting that we're starting to get funds through this source as well. And then we also have our transportation alternatives. And this is a large part of what we prioritize, this transportation alternative program. These are our walk bike safety projects. We've gotten a lot of funding for City of Tampa for the Green Spine. We have the South County Greenway that's been funded through this program as well. So these are sort of the questions that had come up through discussion at policy. And I'll just quickly go over those, and then if you have any other questions, let me know. But sort of this started, like I mentioned before, whether or not we wanted to have the legislative bodies have more of a input into the priority list. Like I said, it was largely done at a staff level previously. And then also, because we have a new long-range transportation plan, whether or not we will be modifying how the priority list is developed. It will match sort of the new programs within that long-range transportation plan. But do we want to separate out the major projects so that they're sort of separated from those? We have our safety, our bus replacements, our sort of technology, smaller price projects, and then we also have that major projects program. Do we want to separate those lists out as well? So if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Let me ask a question. Your local government/agency governing board action needed prior to transmittal of priority request to MPO. So you're saying instead of having the staff from each of those jurisdictions do that, for instance, City Council and the County Commission will approve those before it comes here?
Yeah, so we're asking is that either the board approve those lists, so staff would still develop it, bring them to the jurisdictions and their boards, or that if the boards wish, they can appoint a member of staff to, I guess, sort of bless the
You all have
list as well.
conversations with the mayors of those municipalities?
We will be through the letter and additional conversations.
So you want us to approve this today, then you're going to get with the mayors?
Yes. Or we can.
Okay. Any comment, Commissioner Overman, you recognize?
Couple of things that I noticed. You know, in the past, we have had some questions about the process of the priority list. And I keep bringing a priority project up, and apparently I'm getting it out of order, so I'm going to fix that right now. At the last TMA meeting, we were successful in, thanks to Commissioner Kemp's motion, of adding the project that HART has as a sponsoring organization to explore utilizing the CSX railways in a way of creating greater transit assets within Hillsborough County, not only at a local level, but as a precursor to a regional project. That was passed, and it was actually added to our priority list at the TMA level, and I'd like to see that it get added to our local level in terms of making sure that it's on our priority list, given that we've approved it at a regional level. And I wanted to just check the the reference to 275 State Road 60, is that the downtown interchange?
No, that's the West Shore.
The West Shore interchange?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure, so I just wanted to check that. We do have a serious problem with the prior presentation. We saw our crash corridors. And every single one of those roads, it would appear as though the primary reason we're considering it is because we kill people due to speeds inside of more metropolitan than rural areas, with the exception of maybe 15th. That was the one. So I do think that continues to be a priority in terms of how we manifest our partnership with the state in terms of road design at the local level to consider safety over speed as a priority. And I'm not sure where that goes in the projects, but I think it needs to be emphasized. We have a commitment to Vision Zero, but it needs to be more than a commitment to Vision Zero.
Can I just add about those projects real
Sure,
quick?
please.
Those actually did start as a TIP priority that were brought to us from Hillsborough County, and we were able to get that funded through fiscal year '24. And then I believe Commissioner Kemp made a motion to allocate county funding. So that's why we're able to do those projects. But that was originally working with the jurisdiction as a priority project as well.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation.
Mr. Smith, you recognize.
Thank you. The item that we're being asked to approve today is not as heavy-handed as it might have sounded. It's to.
I'm reading it. I'm not reading heavy-handed. I'm reading what it says.
It says we're to approve this letter that was in the backup, and the backup just says that we'll ensure that the projects that are brought to the TIP meeting that we have, which can go until midnight last time, we're ensuring that all the projects come through either the legislative body or however that legislative body has delegated their own authority to their staff. But the idea was to avoid the kinds of things that happened at our last TIP meeting where we were just being asked to approve items that were placed on at the very last minute by staff, and we were having to pass out our own maps showing where those items were because our county commission members had not had a chance to approve those or see those until it was literally midnight that we were looking at them. So this is gone through the policy committee, and with the idea that we just ensure that everything we're seeing at that final TIP hearing has actually come from the elected or their representatives. So that it is coming from, the citizens and their electeds or whoever the elected delegates that authority to.
Commissioner Smith, I understand what you're saying, and I can see that happening on a county commission level as far as this body being a legislative body because we don't have a county mayor. But I don't know if we should be intruding on local government being the cities, asking them to determine whether they have their staff do it or the legislative body or even their mayor. I don't think we as a body should be doing that unless they have the input. I want to hear what the input may be. Next speaker is Rob from Temple Terrace.
Thank you, Chair. Well, a couple things, Sarah. First, I'd like to commend the workshop. I think a couple of years ago, that joint workshop with both the jurisdictions, staff, MPO board members, that was very favorable, very positive. I know our city staff really appreciated that opportunity. I certainly appreciated being a part of it. I am a firm supporter of home rule. And I am not in favor of growing government and bureaucracy. And I have very good confidence in our city planning staff. We challenge, we coordinate, we communicate, and I think that's our responsibility within the city jurisdiction. And I would ask that this body do not rob us of home rule.
And Mr. Chair, I could interject, just to be clear, the MPO statute doesn't allow the MPO board to mandate how the member agencies submit projects. I think the way the letter is written is to request that these be vetted through the agencies just to ensure for informational purposes, but this board doesn't have the authority to mandate how the county or the cities submit their projects. And that was something that was discussed at policy committee when this issue came before them last time. But just putting that piece of information to the record that this isn't written as and couldn't be read as a mandate because the statute wouldn't allow for that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wagner, recognized.
I guess I'm looking for clarification when I look at these bullets. The issue that Commissioner Smith raised, I saw, and I appreciate that. It's the governing body of the staff who has budgetary approval, asking that governing body put forth their priorities after they've been voted on by that governing body, their priorities only. The county do the same. The city, Plant City, Temple Terrace do the same, and providing that as input to what staff then works through the MPO board as, data to set the MPO's priorities would seem to make sense, because any MPO, any member of an MPO, MPO can't tell that jurisdiction how to spend their money. So it makes kind of logical sense to me that jurisdiction ought to be putting forth what their priorities are. And because this MPO can't go back and tell the city where to spend their money if it's not on their priority list. So it gives us a good basis to start from in putting together a regional kind of map, or at least getting a sense. And then the purpose of the MPO body here is to work with your counterparts and come up, with a group prioritization of needs. So I see that as it makes sense from that perspective, understanding it's going to take negotiation, but that's what you all excel at. So, so I get that part, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So I would see that as a good process to implement. Your staff come up with priorities for your commission, for the city council, mayor of each of the other jurisdictions. You approve that, so when it comes in front of us, you're not surprised by something that, your staff may have put on it. That's good stuff as far as I'm concerned. Keeps it clear.
Bill Lott.
I guess I'm feeling a little confused here, because I feel like we're already doing this.
You might be.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You might be. Your city might be.
Okay. Director, our staff already works with your department in coming up with the directives and our priorities and so forth, correct?
Yes.
So this is not a policy change for us looking at it.
The only change would be whether or not the legislative body requests to see the list their staff provides before they provide it to the MPO staff.
Right. So would the Plant City Commission look at the priority list before your staff sends it over to us?
No, we do not do that, no. That's the only difference, though. But you're saying that's not a mandate, that's just it'd be an internal change if we wanted to have that change. Okay, I got it. Okay.
Commissioner Kipp, you recognized.
I appreciate the clarifications that Director Wagner made and Mayor Lott, because that's exactly what happens. I think this was prompted in part, and we had our discussion because of what happened, as Commissioner Smith said, at the meeting for the county commission. We had staff submitting priorities, which we had never voted on, had no idea of. And so when we'll try to correct that from our BOCC perspective, but also we were kind of surprised that could just happen that these would be submitted to the MPO without us even as BOCC members knowing. So I think what you do is, if that's your procedure and you have a choice to, nobody's dictating that be your procedure. If the city of Tampa, for instance, doesn't do that, it's only suggesting that, that people do a knowing procedure, I think, and just saying that, suggesting that this, this be considered as.
And I guess my question is, why would that clause, because I'm going to suggest that we're putting in a policy here versus a suggestion. So why would that even be a part of this
Just
vote
so it's knowing, because we wouldn't have known, and we don't even know what the submissions are for otherwise. So if the city, for instance, if the City Council of Tampa decides that they're doing something else now and they want to continue doing something else, that's fine. No one can dictate to them. It's the ultimate in home rule. I mean, it does make common sense, I think, as Director Wagner said, as a process, and should be just, it's just, I think it's so common sense that it's just, that's why it's kind of strikes you as being, well, of course, this is what you would be doing. And we want to do this at the county for certain, because that hasn't been what we've been doing. We don't even have a mayor, but
So
I'm not
this is more of a county
surprised.
policy than an MPO policy, I
No,
guess.
well, it's not a policy at all. It doesn't even tell us at the county that this is, yeah.
Okay, but I guess where I'm a little confused, isn't this a decision that the county commissioners be making, not the MPO? Because it's almost like the MPO is telling us how we should operate, whenever that, to me, is the discussion the county commission needs to say, that y'all come up with a policy that, hey, we want to approve the list before it goes to the MPO. It sounds like that's a county commission policy, not an MPO policy.
It is, and we'll be bringing it there, but this is also from the perspective of the MPO in terms of what we receive at the MPO. Just, if this letter doesn't dictate anything about what policies anybody has to do. It's just, in terms of how the MPO receives things now, and if they want to, continue to, I don't have it right here, but, there is nothing in here. It's just, we look forward to continuing to work with your staff and securing funding for projects in the future. It's merely it does nothing to change anything. It's not an enforced MPO policy. It's not anything. It's simply from the MPO perspective, in terms of receiving this.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
I think part of the beauty of this is they are discussion questions, for us to discuss. And I think the comments that have made have pointed out that there may be a process that we could value in terms of, before we end up in a public MPO hearing, with 300 people in the audience or more, that this board has, and its elected members, have an opportunity to vet sort of the priority list. Because one of the things that was valuable in that experience is that we were able to hear from each other where our priorities became, what caused those priorities to be manifested. So the question you've asked is, should we workshop them prior to having our own, public hearing? It gives us an opportunity to share, the projects that we've made on our list and why they're important to us, and with the rest of this board, so that we don't end up in the middle of a public hearing fighting over what we should or shouldn't do. I really don't like making you mad. And apparently I did. So I'd prefer not to do that in a public hearing. I'd rather, have that conversation in a workshop prior to getting to the point where we have a public hearing on setting our priorities. It's a great way of collaborating together and making decisions together that serve the entire area, all of our jurisdictions, and not to take anything away from the power and the priorities of what each of our legislative bodies need to find as a priority. It's a way of vetting that conversation before we end up in a situation where we need to look proficient and effective. And that's all I would suggest as a solution, is maybe part of our calendaring would include a pre-TIP workshop among us to really vet out that priority list and talk about those priorities and bring those things that our staff recommends to the table so that we can vet those issues prior to being in a public hearing.
Mr. Chairman?
Hello, Mr. Klug.
Yes. I think what the main difference is, you're saying this is a suggestion, and the letter says we ask, and maybe just changes that word from ask to suggestion. So it says that we therefore ask that the projects be submitted in the next round, maybe just we therefore suggest. And it's a suggestion to each board. It's not mandatory. And so maybe that takes care of that solution. It's not, if this is not a mandatory policy, just make sure it's more in terms of a suggestion versus a mandate.
Okay. Mayor Hott.
I I like where Commissioner Overman's going with this, okay? And I understand where this is coming from. I think now is that I do believe that when we look at that amendment and those priorities and so forth, that there should be a lot more discussion from this board, okay? And I think it should be way before we get to the approval process, to where when we're sitting here, there's no surprises like I had on 60 that night, okay? I was shocked. I mean, that's something we'd worked a long time for. I thought it was a no-brainer, then all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, I was like, where'd that come from, you know? And so it makes you start wondering, well, what was going on behind, you know, was there a deal cut behind the scenes? So, you know, you start getting a priority, you know? So my point is that, when we go to that vote, you know, we pretty much have already vetted out and we know where each other's priorities are at and not being surprised that particular night. So I concur with you. I would love to see us have a workshop where we can go through the top 10, the top 20, or whatever it is, and know exactly where we all are at there and spend some time on it, not just a quick vote one night that is maybe 10 or 15 minutes long. So if that's what you're trying to occur here, I would much more, be in favor of that than for us to have a suggestion or an ask to tell the local municipalities on how we should operate. And I think that's up to us to how we operate, you know. So.
Councilman Maniscalco?
No, I look at it as, at council, when we pass a resolution or we pass an ordinance is law, so it's, it's put in place. A resolution is a suggestion, take it or not take it at all, but that's it. We're just becoming more efficient, is how I see it, that's all.
Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, the order of the bullets is the order of which we're talking about here to prepare things for a group discussion, a workshop, and I think it should be the whole board, not just the policy committee.
Right.
We're asking each governing body, whether that's city or county. It also includes the port, the airport, and the expressway authority. Those governing bodies have budgetary authority over their projects. That you send your recommended priority list that you as the elected officials have approved, and I would bring forward as my board has approved to the staff to that workshop to discuss. And then we work through it in a more, where we have more time to fully understand what's each party's interests are to come up with a let's say, a more agreeable tip when we come to the board approval process.
Any other discussion on this issue?
Good discussion.
So do we need a motion to add, to modify our calendar to establish a target workshop date for that particular activity? Is that?
We wouldn't need a motion. I think staff could have the authority to do a workshop. We would agree to do a workshop. Staff to get a date for us for a workshop.
It's proposed for March the 24th, which is a Tuesday, so that would be the normal time of the policy committee meeting. But we'll get a larger room so that everybody can participate.
At this time, you're asking for us to approve this letter, am I correct?
If you wish to approve the letter to forward, yes, but it's up to the board. It's up to the board whether or not you want to forward the letter. It seems like we've established that there will be a workshop, so through the discussion, if you still want to forward the letter or not.
I'll move that we approve the letter with Mr. Director Kluge's suggestion that we therefore suggest that the project submitted in the next round, spring 2020, instead of ask.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Smith. So what will that particular section read now?
Instead of saying, well, if you want me to read the start of the paragraph, because competition is strong for the available dollars, we'd like to confirm that projects submitted by the city are widely supported. It says we therefore ask, but this would be, we therefore suggest that the project submitted in the next round, spring 2020, be transmitted to us by your organization's legislative body, or that the responsibility be affirmatively delegated to your organization's staff by the legislative body.
Okay. Any questions, any discussion on the motion that was made by Commissioner Kemp and second by Commissioner Smith? Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, the letter says the city.
Right.
So this is just Tampa, Plant City, Temple Terrace. It would not include port, airport,
Yeah, it would be all of them. But we just drafted
How
one
about by
letter
the-
as an
Okay.
example.
Okay.
By the legislative body.
Yeah, or the agency.
Jim Burke.
So I'm inclined not to support the letter. I feel like
Yeah, I don't think so.
it feels to me that we've got, the way the city works, right, is that you're asking for, again, another layer of discussion that, if my understanding of it is that the mayor actually establishes the priorities for transportation. I mean, I know that the city votes on the budget, so now what you're doing is you're asking the mayor to submit, the mayors to, and I don't know how, I'm sorry, Plant City works, but at least in the city of Tampa, that to submit her priorities to the city council for a vote or an approval before it goes to the MPO. So it feels, if this, from where I'm sitting, and I feel like the same thing with the Aviation Authority perhaps. So it feels like a workshop is a really good idea, and to continue with the process where we have the staff members working together and then bringing something for a workshop for a more robust conversation before it comes to the full, to the MPO in a public hearing for a vote. So I just want to, I won't be supporting the letter.
Mr. Wagner, you recognize?
One minor change to the letter, rather than say legislative body, I would suggest it say governing body,
That's good.
because when you talk about cities, the councils versus the mayors and the powers they have their own process they go through, regardless of who submits the budget, who approves the budget. And it's after it goes through that cycle that the money is set up. And again, if the money's not set up, the project doesn't get into the TIP. So the governing body is what we're asking to forward their priorities, regardless of what kind of process they have to go through normally to get projects approved and funded for their jurisdiction.
So your amendment would be, instead of saying legislative body, would say governing body.
Correct.
Okay, is there a second to the amendment? Second by Commissioner Overman. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the amendment by changing the language to governing body, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers? Okay, the amendment is adopted. We're now back on the amended motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers likewise?
Nay.
Motion.
Nay.
I'm sorry, I missed something there. All those in favor, let it be known by raising your hand. All those opposed? Motion is adopted. Okay. Anything else, ma'am?
Nope, thank you very much.
Very much. Status report, managed lanes?
Good morning. My name is Anna Quinones. I'm with the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority. I'd like to introduce Rick Gobeil. He's from Stantec. He, along with Phil Eshelman, also from Stantec, are traffic and revenue consultants. And Rick will be presenting on managed lanes this morning. Not that one, not that one. I'll also go ahead and add that since we have a limited amount of time, Thea would like to host a workshop to discuss this topic more in depth.
No, it's none of those.
It may not actually be on here.
Oh, do you have a copy of it?
So
Yeah.
I'm going to pick up where Anna just left off. Because
Is it
the
here?
concept of managed lanes has been discussed at what I think is a very thin level. It's very deep, all right? There are many flavors, there are many styles of managed lanes and what they can do for you in terms of mobility and addressing your future transportation needs. We'd like that, in the same sense you just talked about having a workshop on, we need to come together and have our priorities set. We'd like to offer a much more in-depth opportunity to discuss managed lane. Rick's going to touch on a number of facilities that are out there around the country, and they are growing rapidly. But the flavor of each is tuned to that community that it's provided in. So it isn't a one-size-fits-all. It isn't a one application must be adopted. You actually, if it's in your jurisdiction, you have a part to play in defining how that works and what your needs are. So I'll stop there and let you guys our presentation up now.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Thank you. Can you hear me? First, I got to apologize. Like, I live in New York, and I brought you cold weather, and I apologize. I was kind of hoping to come down and get warmed up when we were walking around last night, and I didn't have enough clothes, which is really interesting. All right, a little bit about, we had done a presentation to the policy committee and to a couple of the members, and some in-depth about managed lanes and what they are. Real quickly, who I am, my name is Rick Obiel. I'm the sector leader for tolling and Stantec. It's a consulting engineering firm. And I've done this work all over the country, all over the world. And one of my primary focuses is actually coming up with revenue forecasts for these facilities and helping how to finance and fund them and operate them and things like that. So that's a little bit of my background. So I think it's pertinent here. A lot of people have a misunderstanding of what a managed lane is. A lot of the press and things you hear, they talk about managed lanes as a way to generate revenue. And really, I think the appropriate way to talk about managed lanes is it's a way to manage mobility. And there's actually a wide range of managed lanes that are out there. It can be used to manage access, all right? Some of the Port of Long Beach actually has a roadway only for the container trucks to get them in and out of the port without going through the city. It can be used to manage mobility, all right? And for many, many years, 40 or 50 years, New York has had an express bus lane that provides only service for buses into Manhattan each morning. Or it can be used as a pricing tool, and that's the one I think most people are familiar with. It's a way to use price to manage the flow of traffic and guarantee travel time for customers. And the key to all of this is, as a planning organization, to set what your goal is for these managed lanes, all right? And here there's a range. You can totally set up a system to manage mobility. And it does not generate revenue, it does not give you cash, it does not give you money, but it manages mobility, right? You can go to the other extreme, and these are the ones people see in the newspaper here, these very high, $50, $70 to go in a lane. And you can use it to generate revenue as a source of funds for other projects. And then you can go anywhere in between. So I'm going to just kind of briefly summarize, we have a short period, of some of the different cases. If you're to use your managed lanes strictly to maximize mobility, here are some examples of them. It's to give you travel time reliability. It's to meet a public goal, all right? And they're typically operated by the public, not by a private entity. And their primary goal is mobility. And there's some examples, and a few of these have been around a long time. The New Jersey Turnpike, the main line of the Turnpike has the 6 lanes are split into 3 and 3 for large portions of it. The outermost lanes generally serve commercial vehicles. The innermost lanes serve passenger cars. And then it's set up this way for whenever they have to do maintenance and things like that, they can do it safely and they actually close off roadways and they don't have the issues with the workers in the roadways when they're doing maintenance. So it manages mobility that way. There's the express bus lanes that go into Manhattan at the Lincoln Tunnel. And I believe that's actually the most dense transit system in the world. All right, there's over 1,000 buses an hour going into that lane into Manhattan each day, and there's actually thousands in the morning, hundreds of thousands of people go into the city that way, and it's dedicated strictly for commuter buses. And then some of the express lanes in Atlanta, this is maybe the one that's a little bit more pertinent. They took an HOV lane, and then they sold the extra capacity in the HOV lane, and they used the money to buy buses and build parking rides, and they provided a priority service for commuter buses for more disadvantaged people in the suburbs to get access into the core of the city faster. All right, and those systems generally they manage mobility. They really don't generate revenue. You can go to the other extreme, all right, when you're trying to optimize revenue. All right, they guarantee travel time reliability, but they do it with price by making the road more expensive and getting less people into it. Just a little side interesting phenomena there. Sometimes if the price goes higher, more people go into it because they feel there's more value to it. So there's the whole art to managing the price to manage traffic. They're becoming more common in places, and it's seen by a lot of the public as a way to build infrastructure and have a third party provide the capital, the operating, and fund it that way. And revenue generally becomes the focus because it's a business operation. It's a private entity. Some of the examples of that is I-495 and 95 around Washington, D.C. They did a huge infrastructure improvement in the whole corridor that included these managed lanes. And they're rather expensive, but they were funded a huge improvement for the corridor with that. In Dallas, North Tarrant, same thing. Infrastructure that they built, and it's funded privately, and it is comparatively expensive. And in Charlotte, they're building managed lanes also that are privately built, and the concept is to generate revenues to completely fund it. Then there's roadways that are somewhere in between. And again, is to provide travel time reliability, but there's some mix between mobility and revenue. Maybe you get enough revenue to operate it, maybe to pay part of the capital cost of it. The tolls might not be low, but they're not high either. They kind of are a balance in between them. And a couple examples, one of the first ones is SR 91 in Southern California. That's the picture there. Now, it's interesting, you see it looks like there's a huge difference in the amount of traffic in the lanes. But by managing the price and keeping the vehicles moving faster in the dedicated lanes, almost the same amount of traffic is going in each lane in a given period of time. It's just to optimize the flow. Now, and interesting with this one is it was originally a private facility. It had within it, it had a contract that said the county could not build alternate routes. And the county made a decision to buy it back from the private entity. And the county now owns it and operates it, and it's a very successful corridor for them to provide mobility. In some other lanes in Southern California, 405 is going to be similar, all right, where it's a county running it, and it's a mix of providing the revenues to make infrastructure improvements, but to also provide access. A couple things I'm going to point out. There's a perception, and I heard from somebody recently that the Toyota company doesn't like this name, Lexus Lanes, all right, that they serve people of higher income. And interestingly, there is available, we presented it in some of our things, and we can make it available, that they actually survey the type of vehicles in those lanes, and it's predominantly Fords and Chevys and smaller cars like that. And there's another aspect of it, is there are very few people that actually use these lanes every day. They're used by people on any given day that need this travel time reliability. It might be parents with daycare. A lot of them maybe is a contractor, a plumber, that they can get an extra job in a day. They're not used very frequently, but by any one individual, but they are always providing this travel time reliability for folks. So there's, and I just got to summarize, and I know you can't read this, but there's this huge range across the country of applications for these managed lanes, anywhere from providing mobility to generating revenue, to having different prices at time of day. There's ones that are reversible that go one way in the morning, out another way at night. And there's an interesting phenomenon with all of these that, we as forecasters still don't understand, but thank goodness for Apple Maps. It always puts people in these lanes, the Apple Maps. So there's people driving at times at night and things where there's really not a value. But we can certainly answer more questions. I think, Joe, you already mentioned the opportunity to do that. And we did a more detailed presentation for the policy committee and some of the members, but free to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you for your presentation. From my own biases, I'm just not really crazy about them, but I do recognize they do have value in certain circumstances. We have on our state map a description of expressway without necessarily referencing managed or managed lanes from basically Pinellas to Orlando, on the map, on the website. And so during one of our meetings recently, we were talking about what's happening between, West Shore and the part of the section of our CIS, I would assume, There was the conversation of toll between the West Shore interchange and downtown Tampa. So my question relates to where in the process, for our knowledge, do we discover that expressway, which is described on our state website as being, from basically Pinellas to Orlando, do we make the decision that the best modality is a managed lane process without finding out that we're approving that in the planning process? Because
I don't know if I can answer that one.
what I'm asking is, where in our process do we find the best method of determining whether a managed lane can achieve the goal for the overall region in our responsibility process?
Wagner, do you want to answer that?
Typically, that happens in the PD&E process, and I can't speak for DOT, but I think the definition of express lanes does not predetermine how they're managed. It does not set that there is one style for every express lane set out there. I think they try to engage us. They want to engage us during the project development evaluation phase to have that discussion and understand. I've never looked at it as a black or white discussion. This community is a century away from having anything like the New York City bus-only lane kind of demand that makes sense. I am not a fan of, P3 guys might get upset, I'm a P3 managed lanes because I think there's more of a public purpose in the mobility. And if you can help fund it yourself, because that's what you're doing when you go P3, you're asking them to come up with the financing, but that will cost you more. And that will drive them to price the facility's use to the higher end of that scale that Rick showed you. So it's a blend of, you try to optimize mobility. If part of your solution is to keep the cost as low as possible to your customers, then you have to look at how you fund it. If you want to include, if there's a funding gap to build that facility, you may want to use some of that tolling potential to help you come up with a new source of financing for the project and blend that funding in. I have models that I could share with you that I'd love to talk about at the workshop that we're going to hold, and it'll be a public notice. So if you're all there, that's great. Great learning opportunity as far as I'm concerned. But it's a blend, and it's an opportunity to look at what is sustainable for the future and actually build in more mobility for the future than almost any other concept that you can come up with.
Go ahead.
The reason, Mr. Wagner, the reason that is important to me, I'm in the process of trying through our affordable housing efforts and a variety of other social programs, but in defining an equity profile for Hillsborough County. And the data to sustain whether or not a PPP, project is the best way to go versus other managed processes, I think needs to be inherent in our process in determining that well before we get to the point where we're spending significant dollars to engineer a project. And that's why I was asking, because I think that the data that you have suggested that there's not an economic spectrum that is included or excluded from a managed lane process seems to conflict with my own personal bias. But I'd love to see the data to prove that, if that were the case, and that's why I brought it up. So, thank you.
Secretary.
Yeah, just real quickly, and talking about the state's perspective. Well, I guess it's probably 4, 5, 6 years ago maybe, there was an internal policy at FDOT that any new capacity on the interstate system would be tolled managed lanes. And a couple years ago, we modified that, and that's no longer. Now the policy is that we are going to put the appropriate type of lane in the appropriate environment. It could be that the lanes, and revenue is not our goal on these. The revenue is simply there to moderate flow in those lanes. But for instance, in Jacksonville, we added some lanes up there, and they're not managed dynamically. They're a certain toll at a certain time of the day, and then other times of the day, they're free. We could look at something like that. And I think the thing to remember is that it's very simple to change how you manage those lanes in the future as technology changes. As I envision one day that we could have those lanes be for autonomous and connected vehicles. maybe we create an environment where we can move lots of cars very efficiently in those lanes, but we necessarily don't want to have vehicles without that technology operating in that same environment. And so I think there's lots of ways we can manage it in the future. Typically, we find that in the very congested areas, that dynamically tolling them in the peak periods is probably the most effective way to try to moderate that flow. But as I mentioned, when you look at the studies, it's not all just higher income folks that use that. And in fact, I had a guy from a pest control company tell me that he really likes them because he can get his guys out to more jobs in the same day if he goes into toll than he can if he just sits in regular traffic. So, but it's not a revenue generation tool. But if it generates revenue, we can use that, like we do in South Florida, to help subsidize buses and so forth for express bus service. So that's just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Yeah, well, with so much of this, appreciate that presentation, but with so much of this, the devil is in the details. And I think it would be much more valuable to understand some case studies about this. I've read about these and all over the nation. I know I've heard twice at least, because I had asked before about any interstate lanes in the entire nation that serve actually transit. And it's been mentioned 2 or 3 times here now, the absolute only example that I had, which has been decades and decades of the Lincoln Tunnel serving transit. Otherwise, there's no interstate lanes that you would have that kind of investment to serve transit only.
Exclusively.
Yes,
Right.
exclusively. That would not happen. And so, but we keep having that discussion here like as if it would be a real thing to have here. And I just think that doesn't make any sense if it is nowhere in the nation except for Lincoln Tunnel. But moving on from there, I just think that there's P3s that have done these around the country and that have gone belly up. I know if you know these well enough, you know of these examples. There's things like just if we look at most of these projects, they've used lanes that have already been there, as they did in Miami, or at least roadbed that's already been there, and then restriped it. So it was a public investment. The public paid for it, yet the public can't necessarily use it as a 6-lane. It's a lane that is charged for. In a lot of places, they actually just the charging mechanisms, the tolling mechanisms are cost more than any revenue that the lane brought in to do that and just do all the infrastructure required for separate exits and entrances when that is something that occurs with these lanes. I know in Miami, first of all, they used roadbed that was already there. They striped it. They put in these lanes, and they were supposed to be able to go up to any variable amount to keep the lanes open and running and to give people maybe 2 minutes more of arrival time. When they started, people have used them like crazy, and they filled up with traffic. So they started tolling above $10.50 to use it for 10 miles, I guess, or something. And there were huge, backlash at the state legislature here, so that now they have it limited to $10.50 no matter what the traffic is, so they can't really manage the mobility on it. I know in Virginia, the lanes that you mentioned at 495 are costing on an average each day of $37 for 10 miles, which obviously can only be, whether it's Fords or whatever, it's not something that, a regular normal person could afford on any basis. And then there's people that are having thousands of dollars that they're being hit with in fines and whatever else. So I just think that there's a lot of information that if we went and did like a case study of 5 different ones and the models that they used, it would, give us a kind of more balanced view of some of this. But I just would like to add that in. And the other thing I just really like to see us going back to HOV, because I think that's the really greatest public purpose is to stop that with the single occupancy vehicle and really start to use our lanes more efficiently in that way.
Mr. Wagner, you recognize. Mr. Wagner.
I think these would be great topics for a workshop. It is not, there's great opportunity. It's a wide range of opportunity. There's a wide range of applications for managing lanes. They can address our social equity issues if they're applied the correct way. You can incorporate buses into priced personal vehicles, and you could put 100 buses an hour into a price managed lane and leave 90% of the capacity of that lane available to people in their personal vehicles. That would be a huge mobility people mover. If you had 40 people per bus, it would compete with a commuter rail, light rail kind of system. The future of that potential, if you had connected bus services, you have essentially what could be, buses running on those lanes that are connected and be providing light rail, commuter rail type capacity in there. And by pricing that, you create a sustainable revenue source to help you pay for those systems that is very unique, because my focus is also on what's financially sustainable. What are you going to be able to build? So I'm going to stop now because I think rather than debate it here, I think it's a great idea for us to have a workshop and let you see what the options and opportunities are, and that's something we'd love to do.
Can you, Mr. Smith, to recognize?
Thank you. One slide that you showed me that is missing today is, I thought it was pretty revealing. There's a system where there's 4 lanes that are free and 1 lane that was tolled. The 4 free lanes are going 50 miles an hour at peak time. The 1 toll lane is going 59 miles an hour. And that toll lane was paying like $10 to $13 to go 9 miles an hour faster. So if they're, just going 10 or 20 miles, they're saving the time they'd save in a stoplight by paying the toll. Now, the difference is, everybody'd be riding in the toll lane if they could. All right, Chevy, Ford, Terminix, Guy, whatever, everybody would want to be riding in there. The difference is who can afford it, who can afford to pay the toll. And so, if I may, making it, what government is doing there is making a first-class system and a second-class system for people who can pay the primary priority fee, like an airplane. First-class system, second-class system, and they're going a little bit faster. I don't see that as the function of government. And if you took this and made all 5 lanes free, the people over here who've been going 50 miles an hour, they're not going to go slower when they have this extra capacity. Some of them are going to move over here. And now these people who are going 59, well, they're going to go slower because some of these people are going to come in. But the whole system will end up being, 53 miles an hour. So yay to me. And this is what, and now government and the taxpayers have paid for a system that is benefiting everybody equitably. And that's why I'm not going to be voting for a system where government creates a first-class luxury lanes on the side of the lanes for the rest of us.
I'm not advocating for any particular policy, right? And that, I'm just going to pick that particular case. Those are also high occupancy vehicles are free. And it was originally only those vehicles in that lane. And then the revenues from that were used to buy transit buses to provide prioritized travel for the transit buses into Atlanta. So I think there's real value in the workshop so that you can actually see all of these case studies and what is the policy of the different ones and what their policy goals were to try and achieve.
Hold on, folks. We're going to beat this horse to death. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask Ms. Alden to get with Mr. Wagner, and we're going to have a workshop on this, and you can ask all the questions you want at that particular point in time.
I have one more thing.
Mr. Smith.
Yes. looking at the toll lane example, that's luxury lanes. Then there's a facility like the Selman Expressway that everybody's paying the same amount. Now, that, in my view, is a somewhat different kettle of fish. But we have a good opportunity when we're talking about workshops and future discussion items. I would like to suggest that since they've just finished the report on that Selman Expressway Sun Pass system that turned into something of a fiasco, and it's being revealed that the procurement process for the vendor there had a lot of problems too. I think it would be a good opportunity for us to look at the results of that study and what worked and what didn't work, and lessons learned, and how, if we're talking about toll lanes and toll systems and managed systems, let's look at the case study that we have running right through our community that had some problems, and what are the solutions to those problems. So as a future topic.
I don't know what that has to do with express lanes, but that's something that we'll work out, okay? All right, Mr. Secretary, you have something to say?
Real quick, just HOVs, carpools, van pools can operate free within our managed lanes. So it can become an HOV lane if there are more people that want to use it as an HOV lane. The other thing is, we would not be building an express lane if our cars were going 50 miles an hour during the peak periods. We're building it because they're going like 20 miles an hour. So I see your point. If we had a situation where it was 50 miles in the free lanes and a 59, we probably would just make it all free because we wouldn't have a problem.
So one of you asked a question for me. Why do they call them Lexus lanes?
We don't call them Lexus lanes. Somebody else made that name up. I would call it managed lanes, but.
To those of us that drive Lexuses, I just want to make sure that.
I don't know the origin of that.
All right, thank you very much.
Means you're free wherever you drive.
Thank you, thank you.
It means you can afford it. That's where the.
No, I got a car payment. How can I afford it? All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Ms. Alden, MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee Interlocal Agreement.
Sir, I'll be brief and do this from my seat. The agreement that we are bringing to you today for consideration is among 6 MPOs in West Central Florida for regional transportation planning and coordination. And the proposal is to make 2 major changes to it. So one would be to incorporate the Tri-County Tampa Bay TMA Leadership Group under the auspices of the larger group of 6 MPOs. So this formalizes the status of the TMA leadership group and makes it a part of the overall regional planning and coordination agreement. The other major change has to do with the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee's relationship with TBARTA. So about 5 years ago, the CCC was merged with TBARTA. Since that time, the legislature has changed the role of TBARTA and the geographic focus of TBARTA. So where TBARTA used to be multimodal and cover almost the same geographic area as the CCC, it's now narrowed in its geographic area and focuses only on public transit. And so the proposal at this point is that we come back to this agreement among the 6 MPOs to take the lead on multimodal transportation planning in West Central Florida and reestablish that role. There really are just some tweaks in here. Not relying on the TBARTA staff to provide all of the staff support for this regional planning process, but instead going back to each of the MPOs to contribute in kind with their staff support to support this regional planning process. Any expenses for the CCC will come before you in your Unified Planning Work Program, so you would approve each of those if there are any. And I think that's it. That's really the substantive changes. We will be, we're circulating this to all 6 MPOs this month for comment. We'll then be bringing it to the MPO Chairs meeting on December the 13th for a recommendation of approval. It will then come back to each of the 6 MPOs for a vote of approval. So is there anything that you would like me to bring forward to the MPO Chairs meeting on December the 13th about this change to the regional planning agreement?
Any questions? Okay. Okay, Safe Routes National Conference highlights.
Okay, you ready for something a little more lighthearted? Okay, we had the pleasure of hosting the National Safe Routes to School Conference here at downtown Tampa. It was just 2 blocks away at the Hilton, but that's not the only thing that was going on. So it's kind of a misleading title here because we had 2 weeks of lots of safety things going on, which I'm going to summarize very quickly for you. So the conference was 3 days, the 12th through the 14th. It was nearly sold out. There were 184 proposals proposed originally for 36 sessions, of which our MPO staffs were involved in 4 of those, so we felt pretty great about that. There were 7 mobile workshops, of which we highlighted and showed off all of our great downtown and safety features, and there were many partners and participants in that, so I'll hit on some of those. Coupled with that, we decided let's have the second Vision Zero themed Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit at the same location at the same time. So as soon as the Safe Routes Conference concluded, we walked across the hall and began the Regional Safe Streets Summit that afforded us a great opportunity to have that exorbitant cost of the hotel and facilities and AV costs absorbed by our sponsor, Safe Routes Partnership. So we really appreciated that. We had approximately 110 attendees there. So taking advantage of having all these Safe Routes coordinators and safety professionals in town, central office of the Department of Transportation asked if we would host the state safety engineers meeting. So that was going on Tuesday morning before the kickoff of the conference in our MPO offices. Coincidentally, at the same time, Federal Highway decided to have the safety target setting performance measures workshop. So that was going on Wednesday and Thursday. So some of our staff are running over and presenting and running back to the office, doing all that. And then the following week, we had people stick around and people from all over the nation fly in for the first National Vision Zeros for MPO's peer exchange, and I'll hit some of those highlights. Of course, your school transportation working group, first in the nation to have a school board member on an MPO and have this particular look. We had our panel of, even the intern that started the idea and all the professionals. We congregated and did a presentation on that. One thing I learned in that is that we've grown from the 8th largest in the nation to the 7th largest in the nation school district. Michelle and Wade of your staff did a presentation with the health department on health and equity in transportation planning. Of course, Gina Torres, your Vision Zero point of contact, was not on 1, but 2. So she had her own where we highlighted the one message, many voices. So we had many of those voices right there at the table. So those citizens in the community came and spoke. And then she was asked to be on the Vision Zero hands-on workshop with the founder and director of the Vision Zero Network. So then we discovered our mayor of the city of Tampa said, oh, the Safe Routes Conference is coming to town. Let's announce and designate City of Tampa as an official Vision Zero city, and let's install the first crosswalk to classroom right here in downtown, blocks away from the hotel, in honor of that. So she mobilized her staff, and we had planning commission staff volunteers and their little ones that attend that school, and some of our consultants donated the paint. So in 2 weeks' time, with $2,000, we installed this very quick and effective crosswalk at Rampello Magnet School. And here in the picture, you get to see me and the executive director of the Safe Routes Partnership. They were very pleased, and they mentioned their warm welcome reception in their opening reception. I don't know why the videos are flipping, but anyway, so it's transformed over time. You get to see it, and it's book themed, and they're looking to start rolling these out. I believe they're going to use our MPO school safety study to help prioritize the schools that are have the most fatalities first, and then also bring in that reading and learning opportunity with the book themes. So a couple of our secretaries participated not only in the conference, but in our Safe Streets Summit. So on the first day, they had a lot about engaging children in the planning, and I've known that and done that over my years of community planning, et cetera, but they had some really effective examples of the children being right there in the public hearing and communicating, and who doesn't want to listen to a child about safety? And they had some really effective things to say because of their perspective and how they experience the community. So I'm giving you key takeaways as I go through here. We had the Planning Commission staff and the YCDC help us with our EBOR mobile workshop. That was very popular, and some chickens were spotted along the way. That day's plenary was a lot about equity, so we had a big equity theme. On day 3, we had that press conference with the crosswalk to classrooms, and lots of the importance about stories. I queried everybody that attended the conference and asked them to give me their key takeaways to help with this presentation today. So learning how to communicate your story to enroll people in new behaviors and new forms of design was one of the importances. Jeff Speck, a noted author, was our plenary speaker on the last day, and then he transitioned and helped us with the summit as a moderator. So one of the takeaways there is, like, if the kids are distracted by their phones, shouldn't we just make the streets, sure the streets are safe for them? I mean, we are not going to get them to put down their phones, so we have got to approach this differently. And that was one of my takeaways in all of the things I attended. It's like, yes, education, encouragement are great, and they're wonderful ease in our toolbox, but it is completely the engineering and the design of the roadways that is the most effective impactful change agent. We have lots of great opportunities for networking and building knowledge and confidence, which led to more empowered champions. So some of our citizens are not engineers, they're just parents and moms and out there, and they attended and they came away with a lot of that confidence. They told me they really felt empowered and knowledgeable to go apply these in their community and at their schools. Here you get to see some of them in action. One of the mobile workshops I called Completing the Route to School. So we headed out from the Hilton, went across and taught them how to do a road safety audit of some things that are not so workable in our downtown pedestrian environment. And then they were arrived at school and encouraged and rewarded as students that walked to school by our sidewalk stompers. And then they turned the corner and went down our first ever state cycle track on Jackson Street and then headed back to the hotel. So, as I mentioned, we transitioned into the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit from 2 to 8 that day. Thank you. There's many of our panelists are in the room, and commissioners that spoke at the event. At the reception portion of the evening, we each MPO that's a participant in the Gulf Coast gave a nomination or an award as a Vision Zero Hero or Bob the Builder Award. So you can see them on the red carpet there. One of the topics we highlighted was the Human-Centered Mobility Bill of Rights, which inspired fascinating dialogue. Here's our Vision Zero Hero and Bob the Builder. He got kind of a hybrid award because he does both. He's amazing and wonderful, and he helped implement that crosswalk. So, and if that wasn't enough, we thought, oh, hey, let's just get back up the next day on Friday after our evening and have our annual Walk of Silence. We thought that maybe there would be lingerers from the conference, and let's bring awareness to safety all throughout the week. So we headed out on a drizzly day. Luckily, it was beautiful during all our mobile workshops, but it was a little cold and rainy that morning. But we traversed the downtown while we got all of our rush hour employees and tourists coming to downtown and did a little loop. So Okay, then the next week at my Livable Roadways Committee, we're like, oh, hey, Leah Shahum is still in town, and she's going to be attending the Federal Highway Peer Exchange. Let's have her be a guest speaker at our Livable Roadways meeting. And so you see us all there having a great love affair with all these Vision Zero topics. We had the phenomenal Vision Zero speed management study presented to the committee that day. So it really partnered very well with what Leah has to say, but she's from a completely different perspective. So we have the engineer here, we have the advocate there. We got to see how all those messages mesh together. Then a day or two later, we're sequestered here with Federal Highway, and MPOs from all over the nation came to learn from us and us from them. And so we went through the various presentations for a little lunch tour treat. We threw them on a bus and took them up to the garden steps, community garden in Tampa Heights, and they did get to see that painted intersection. And we learned a lot of things from that. I'm going to hit some of those. Okay, so at that, we're like, oh, they all complemented our data. Our data is helping us find value and tell the stories, but it's got some, I'll head into that. Okay, so then also, pause on that one because it's on my second slide. So data is telling us stories, but it's not always the same corollary. One thing I learned, like, oh, red light cameras, they are not popular in the news or in Florida, but they are highly, highly effective. So I attended a session where they're using them in New York, and they started, and they were only allowed on non-arterial roadways, and they proved how great and effective the stats are saving children's lives on those roadways, that they just became able to then install them on their arterial roads where, as we all know, arterials are our worst roads. So I already mentioned children and families. And again here, Families for Safe Streets, having the families tell the stories, having people enrolled in that is what caused those enforcement changes in many of the communities that we learned from. So it's not just the data and the engineers in the back rooms. You have to have the whole community involved. They've applied lower speed limits and on all their arterials in that town. And they're one of the few communities that are causing the numbers to go down. And, okay, I already mentioned that one. Okay, so back to that. So crashes for vehicular is going down. We're building safer cars. I mean, they can see things and stop and brake for you. So our vehicular crashes are going down, but our vulnerable users are going way up. And so we have got, it's even more important. So Vision Zero is kind of behind the 8 ball on us. So it's like, it's going this way, but even in the Vision Zero communities, because there's a gap and a lag in the data and the reporting. So we're committed to Vision Zero, but we're not out resurfacing and redesigning all of those roads. Like I said, the engineering is the most effective, but it takes some time to get the engineering implemented and then to have that data to back it up and show that we're going back down. Also, a fun fact I learned is that the crash report data is great, but it only tells one part of the story. That when you get bumped and hit by a bicycle and you knocked off your bicycle, there's not always a police report to document that. But the trauma centers have that data. So there's a big disparity in what the trauma centers are finding and reporting as those. So that's one way the MPO took away, was like, oh, we can do a lot to improve that. Some safe route coordinators are embedded right into the Department of Transportation. They work out of the Department of Transportation, are surrounded by their staff. So those roadways that are most dangerous have that person right there effective with them. Some of them are like paid part by that and part by the health department. So there's some interesting partnerships there. One area is suggesting that the Walk to School Day move to November 14th because it's also Ruby Bridges Day. So we were having our conference during that same time frame. One person told me their big takeaway was they liked the idea of the temporarily closing streets along and around the schools. So it's kind of like open streets or ciclovia, and they called play streets. So they're closed to vehicular traffic. And then quality of life is health. And that was another takeaway. So those are my major highlights of 2 weeks of intense safety learning.
Okay, any questions?
I just have one comment.
Commissioner Noble, you recognize.
On the slide before this, I think it is. Yep, that one. Bullet number 4 from Jeff Speck. Why do we keep building schools along major arteries?
Arterials.
Arterials, rather, sorry. I still think of roads as the body,
Yep.
heart, veins, arteries,
Kinda.
capillaries. And we've had a joint workshop with, the school district and land use matters in this conversation, so we can talk about zero, vision zero, all we want, and road design, all we want. But until our local jurisdictions actually incorporate in our land use specs, the necessity of addressing that building schools on our major arterials is a bad plan for safety for our children, we're not going to really change what you're talking about. There is a disconnect.
Yep.
So if we should revisit joint meetings with the school board again, as well as our land use, I think it's going to be strongly recommended that we address that issue. We have TTT opening up with 3 residential things going on to a major arterial that is a recipe for disaster right now, in my opinion, personal opinion. But, and so, we keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, and that's a major concern in our community. If we want to do what we say we're going to do, then we need to start doing what we say we are trying to accomplish. And I think addressing each of our road design and community designs and school placements is going to be an important part of that equation. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much. Ms. Alden, Executive Director's report.
Thank you, sir. And you've probably heard the news by now, but on November the 21st, the Independent Oversight Committee for the Transportation Sales Tax did certify that all of the project plans for the 4 local governments in HART for use of sales tax funding in the coming calendar year they were all certified as being in compliance with all applicable law. And so once the Supreme Court makes a decision, hopefully we can get going without any further delay with implementing those much-needed transportation improvements. On item B, the I-275 North Alternative Study Next Steps, that is the feasibility study that we included in the work program this past year to look at the feasibility of the concept of looking at a boulevard north of downtown Tampa in the I-275 corridor. We have hit a bit of a snag in the scoping of that. So we have one of our general planning consultants does have experience doing this kind of a study, but in negotiating the scope of work, it has become more than we can take on with our budget in this fiscal year. And we'd like to have the opportunity to potentially talk to some other consultants that also do this kind of work. Coincidentally, this is also the time in our cycle when we typically do a procurement for MPO general planning consultants. So my suggestion to you is that we postpone the I-275 North alternative study into the next fiscal year. Our fiscal year, of course, starts on July 1st, to give us an opportunity to open this up and potentially talk to some other consultants. So the process for that, item C, process for 2020 procurement of MPO general planning consultants. Our planning consultant contracts typically run for 5 years. We typically go through a procurement process immediately after adopting our long-range transportation plan, which is also a 5-year cycle. And that enables us to have teams that kind of seamlessly go through all of the steps that then lead up to adoption of a long-range transportation plan. So what we would like to move forward with is an advertisement in January. Then we will have a multi-agency interview panel. So we typically invite members of the local governments and the DOT staff to participate in that consultant selection, so that those consultants are ones that are going to be able to help your staff over the next 5 years with any kind of feasibility studies that you'd like to see. That team would then make a recommendation back to the board to negotiate contracts. The recommendation would probably be in May. We would then, over the summer, negotiate the contracts and bring the contracts back to you for approval in August. And then lastly, item D, I just wanted to draw your attention to the Vision Zero quarterly report that is in your agenda packets. We've included this time around a map, kind of a heat map of our high crash areas, highlighting some of the good work that's been being done around the county on each of those corridors. So do you have any questions for me at this time?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any old business? Any new business? We adjourn.
I'm free.